box is a device that we know or we think we know the functionality, but we don't know how it works. Okay? Things that might be black boxes, DNS, domain name service, the thing that turns www.amazon.com into an internet number. A cell phone. I argue that this is a black box. I have no idea how this thing works. Well, I have some idea. But how it surfs the web over the cell phone lines and can give me, over a cell phone that normally would just do voice, can send me video. I don't know how that works. I can find out, but I don't know. It's a box that I don't know. I know the functionality, but I don't know what goes on inside. Flight control systems. Hey Google, right? That little Google dot thing. Do you know how that works? Well, it's really complicated, actually. There's almost no computing inside the box. It requires a connection to Google for everything. And in fact, it's listening to you more than you know. Pacemakers, the pacemakers that they put in people. My dad had one, and every so often somebody had to come over with a radio receiver device to check on the battery. And they would stick this thing right over his chest right here and read the battery level with a radio device. So they didn't have to dig it out of him or anything. And I have no idea how that works. Most people don't either. Drug dispensers, and so on. Black hats. Black hats are people who interfere with other people's services for some reason. So, credit card thieves, how do they interfere with service? By the way, you will come to recognize this. This is a 20-sided die. If nobody answers, I roll a die and point it at that number. The good thing is that you have a 1 in 20 chance of getting called on. The bad news is you have a 1 in 20 chance of being called on. So credit card thieves, how do they go about doing that? There are several ways. You've probably heard of them. Go.
You know, one of the ways is on ATMs. They have like a certain device that they put in the credit card reader, and it reads the information, and they can take that.
Right. What they do is they add a device to the credit card reader that reads the device and then passes that information onto the ATM machine. So you see just a regular transaction, but they get to keep your credit card number and your PIN number, it turns out. So that's one way. That's good. How about, do you know what a botnet is? A botnet is a collection of machines that are what are called zombies. They are machines on the net that are controlled by somebody who isn't the owner. Very often you will find, grab one of each of those here, please. Hear about denial of service attacks. You know, somebody sending 16,000 gigabytes of something at Amazon or something. What they've done is they've purchased from somebody else, typically, a collection of machines and just told them all to send big piles of traffic at somebody. And that's how they do it. So botnet creators do it for the money. And the way they do it is they send out various, naughty emails that run a Java thing that downloads something to your Windows machine and runs it in the background and rewrites your registry and so on. You've heard about all that. Botnet users, why? Why do they use these bots?
Bitcoin mining?
Huh?
Bitcoin mining?
That's true. That's true. You can use since Bitcoin mining is just using the CPU of the machine and then sending data up to some servers. Yes, well done. That's actually a relatively benign thing because all it does is steal cycles from the owner. They may never notice. How about somebody else? So yeah, that's a good one. But Bitcoin mining is like that. That's not so bad. People often do it on their machine in their dorm room. Anyway. I don't know is an acceptable answer.
I don't quite understand what you mean by
people. Okay, we have people who create these collections of machines to do stuff. For instance, Bitcoin mining. In other words, I steal cycles from a bunch of machines of other people, and I keep the proceeds. Okay, what's another thing they could do? I don't know is an acceptable answer.
I mean, I'm trying to.
Okay, well, I'll tell you a thing. One is really stupid. Okay, for games like World of Warcraft, and so they will try to overwhelm the server so somebody else can't, to ruin the game for somebody else. They get pissed at somebody else, and they just try and destroy the server for everybody to get back at one person. Okay, that's remarkably petty, but it's what people do it for. Go.
Oh yeah, I've heard of like people who would be like streaming something and someone would try to take down their stream.
Yes, that's another way. Okay, if I'm streaming something and somebody doesn't want anybody else to see it, they might attack my machine and overwhelm it with traffic so that it doesn't have enough CPU power left to send out the stream I want to send. That's a good one. Okay, that's enough. Anonymous, the Lizard Squad, Allec, all these guys. These are political subversives. They have a political agenda, a real-world political agenda. Inside traders, they try and steal corporate information from each other and know what the stock is going to do and then buy. And of course, our old friends, the National Security Agency, who tell us they're on our side. Isn't that great? I feel much safer now. And they break into lots of stuff and just don't tell us. Okay, we're going to talk about networks of black boxes. So in other words, if I have a black box talking to a black box talking to a black box, I may not get the results that I think of. Can anybody think of multiple black boxes that you might have in your dorm room or your house that are connected to each other? How about the Wi-Fi and your cable modem? Okay, that's a cable modem who's I guess it works. I get out, and the Wi-Fi, I guess it works, but how do they talk to each other? Is there any security between any of that? Could somebody subvert that? I don't know. I mean, I've looked at the logs on my cable modem. Somebody's banging away on it from me, trying to break into it to do something. Another one is electric cars. We have or even airplanes where we have devices that. Okay, so we have for example, when the pilot moves the joystick back and forth. And it used to be they had these yokes and everything. Some still do. It's not connected by cables to anything anymore. It's connected to a computer that is connected to another computer, which is connected to a motor, which is connected to a physical system. And we're going to talk about a couple of those failing soon. Okay. So when we get multiplied problems when we have multiple black boxes that we don't know what they are, talking to each other and doing things we hope are okay. And the black hats. They typically know more about the black boxes than the rest of us because they study them closely. We'll talk about some of these. There was a fellow who could break into a Tesla and cause it to stop. And Tesla issued a specific software update to stop that particular guy. There's a claim that somebody made, we'll talk about it in more detail later, that somebody could get in through the in-flight system and cause the control surfaces to react to his commands and not the pilot's. And everybody said, oh, that can't possibly happen, but then he showed that, maybe you can. And the NSA, our old friends, the NSA, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Okay, so week 1. Week 3, black boxes, in much more detail. Week 4, black hats in much more detail. Oh, this is a couple of slides from, remember that guy who's now in Russia, what's his name? Snowden, thank you. See, I can't remember. I also cuss a lot, sorry. This is from some of the stuff he let out, okay? SSL admin removed here. Smiley face. Okay? This is them breaking into our connections to Google, which at the time they were asking Google to give them access anyway. While they were waiting, they just decided to break in and get it for themselves anyhow. Nobody knew that this existed until this slide came out, and then the Google people found what was going on. And we're not very happy. Week 5, we're going to talk about medical devices in grim detail. Week 6, you'll be given a system to attack. I think I already said this once. And you'll have to describe how you will attack it. This will be, for a large part, a think and research. It will be a couple of pages of text only. More than that, and, well, you can more than that, but I don't want to read it. So examples of things might be a coal-fired power plant, a computer network, a gaming company. Let's say you wanted to find out what the cheat words were for the latest Blizzard game, and you want to just crack into their system and find it. A Navy warship. That apparently did happen. There was a destroyer about 4 years ago that rather suddenly turned around and came back to port during exercise because every one of its computers went down. They were all Windows 7. They all crashed. It turned out they all had a virus. So week 7 project is due. You give your talks on that. And then week 8, we talk about what the second project is. Week 9, the project's due. You give your talk. And then week 10, we just talk more. Do a lot of talking. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 things. These are human things which I will tell you. I'll try to convince you that these are black box issues, just in a different venue. Okay? Well, remember, a black box is a thing that we don't know how it works. All we know is its supposed function. Start with, this was in 1996 on Mount Everest. There were, Mount Everest climbing is complex and dangerous. And I will argue to you that some of the people can be treated as black boxes, and then we'll talk about why they fail. So you start here at base camp, 17,000 feet in the air. That's higher than I've ever been except in a plane. Then you go up to Camp 1, which is 2,000 feet up, higher, and you go back and forth. And then up to Camp 2, then up to Camp 3, up to Camp 4, and up to the top. And those bars are where people died. So, this is in May of 1996. 8 people will die. That's what, in extremely grim detail, this is. So I'm not suggesting you read it right now, but you might want to read it someday. We have black boxes, which I will try to convince you we can treat them as black boxes. In other words, we can say that this person has this supposed functionality, and then we'll see why it fails. They paid to get up the mountain. Usually $60,000 to $100,000 each. They are supposedly acclimatized. That is to say, they spend about a month getting used to, no yawning in my class. They spend about a month trying to get used to the higher altitude. They have oxygen bottles. They want to get up the mountain, and they want to get down the mountain, and they are physically capable of both. That's a reasonable description of somebody who is paid to go up the mountain, I would argue. The next black box is a guide. Okay, we have 2 kinds of guides. We have what they call a Western guide and a Sherpa guide. Sherpa guides are people from this area who are called Sherpas. That's their it's not a tribe exactly, but it's their group of people. And then there are Westerners from like United States and England and New Zealand and so forth. Okay, they are there to get paid to get the clients up the mountain. Fair enough. They are not paid to go up to the top themselves necessarily. They are there to, part 1, get the clients up the mountain, okay? Paid to be available if the clients have trouble. Paid to direct other guides and Sherpas as necessary and experienced enough to actually be able to help when needed. Is there anything wrong with that? Okay, they're very similar to the Western guides, although typically they are better actually acclimatized than anybody else. They are experienced. They're paid to guide. In this situation, no Sherpas died, for example. Okay, now, Lobsang Jambu was one of the Sherpas. Okay, now he pays special attention to one of the clients. We'll talk about that in a little bit. He does not do what his role requires. His role is to get people up the mountain, down the mountain, and help them. But he pays special attention to one client, to the exclusion of all other duties he's asked to do. He ignores clients to assist another guide who's having trouble. He abandons that client at 10 o'clock on the night of all the dying, and he tells lots of different stories about what he did and why afterwards. Unfortunately, he died a year later in an avalanche, so we can't really get much more out of him than that. Scott Fisher is a guide. He's one of the lead guides. He's in competition with another guy named Rob Hall, we'll get to in a second. He has a special client, Sandy Pittman, the same one that Lobsang Jambu paid attention to because he works for Scott Fisher, because she is a correspondent for NBC News. And she is filing reports from the mountain via satellite phone. We'll discover that he summits far after what we call turnaround time. We'll get to that in a minute. He summits after all his clients have already gone up to the top and coming down. He doesn't help anybody. We'll see that he's basically a big anchor and gets people killed. He appears early on to be in distress. Some of this distress is called altitude sickness. Carry up oxygen, but it's not enough oxygen to just breathe full blast. It's a supplement. And he appears to be in distress early on, and nobody says to him, "You're in distress, you should turn around." So that's Scott Fisher. Rob Hall is the other main guide. He has a special client, a guy named John Krakauer, who's a correspondent for Outside Magazine. He summits far after turnaround time, which we'll get to that. Again, appears to be in distress. He has a special relationship, not with Sandy Pittman and not with Krakauer, but with a guy named Doug Hansen. Beck Weathers is one of the clients. He knows before he gets to Camp 2 that he's going to go blind going up the mountain because he's had eye surgery, and the higher you go, the more ultraviolet rays you get, and it was causing him to go blind. He knew that as he was climbing to Camp 2, not even Camp 4, nowhere near the top. He has a loyalty to Rob Hall. On the day of the disaster, he finally says, "I can't see, I got to stop." And Rob Hall says to him, "Okay, wait right here, and I'll come get you." And Doug will sit in the snow for 11 hours and wait for him. And Rob Hall will never come back. We'll see, he recovers from something that nobody says he can live through. And he manages to walk down the mountain with severe frostbite on all of his toes, this arm, so at the end, this arm is gone, this hand is gone, his nose, he had to have a nose regrown, pretty horrible. And Doug Hansen is another client. We'll see that he is unable to climb high. He just can't do it. He goes very, very, very slowly. And he recognizes that fact early on in the climb, but is convinced by Rob Hall to keep trying, which winds up getting them both killed. And Sandy Pittman is the NBC client. She shows a willingness to sacrifice pretty much everybody else to get her up and down the mountain. It's pretty, I don't much care for her. She had to be given other climbers oxygen on the way down because she had used up all of hers, and otherwise she would have died. We'll jump ahead to Camp 4. So we've gone all through through May 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. We've gotten up the mountain to Camp 4, 26,000 feet, 2,500 feet below the summit. Now, that's very high. Anywhere at or above the south summit is what's called the death zone, where you cannot live without oxygen. You just can't for very long. Although we'll see that at least two climbers do exactly that. So here we are at midnight on May the 10th, right at May the 10th. Everybody is at Camp 4. So now the two main guys, Hall and Fisher, decide that everybody is going to climb at the same time for the reason that there are, quote, safety in numbers, unquote. Now, the problem with that is, number one, none of the ropes that anybody's going to use to secure themselves on the way up or down have been set up yet. And the other thing is that if there's a backup, now you got two groups of people backing up instead of one. So you wind up with 20-some people waiting in line at certain parts of the mountain. So about midnight they take off, go up to the, head up the mountain. Okay. About 1 a.m., Doug Hansen stops and says, "I can't go on." And Rob Hall turns to him and says, because Doug Hansen, one of the things when you read this thing, Doug Hansen had been here last year and didn't make it. And Rob Hall told him that last year, "I'll get you up the mountain." So Rob Hall convinces the guy who has said, "I can't do this, I'm going to turn around," to keep going. Now that is not what a guide is supposed to do. Guide is supposed to help, but not a cheerleader. Okay. So here we have a black box of the guide acting in ways we don't expect. Okay, ways that are actually going to wind up getting both of them killed. Meanwhile, everybody else has gotten up. So now by 5 a.m., everybody is up at what's called the balcony, which is just a sort of a stopping place. It's right there. So we have Beidelman and Vukriev are two of the guides. Fisher, the Hall party, everybody is basically right there. Now Hall says to his group, "We're going to wait here for a while to get us all back in line." He was obsessed with his group being all together. and Scott Fisher wasn't. So his group is going to wait there for 2 hours. They're just going to sit there. Meanwhile, Beck Weathers, the guy who's going blind, has sat down in the snow. And he's going to sit there for a while. So everybody else keeps going up toward the South Summit. The South Summit is an area that is, it looks like the summit, but isn't. Basically, you get up there and, oh, there's more. You go. So 10 a.m., let's see here. Okay, so by 10 a.m., Beck Weathers is still here sitting in the snow. Beidelman and Bukriev, the 2 guides, are at the South Summit setting up ropes. Everybody else is kind of strung out behind them waiting because they got nothing else to do. What should have happened is the rope should have been set up the day before. But nobody did that. And the reason it's Beidelman and Bukriev and not 2 Sherpas is because one of the Sherpas, Loxan Jambu, has paid special attention to one client, Sandy Pittman, and did not leave with his partner to go set up the ropes. And his partner said, I ain't going. I ain't going without help. So nobody set up the ropes. So now everybody's stuck up behind them while these 2 guys try and set up ropes so that nobody falls off the mountain. So we have another black box, Jambu, not doing what we expected. He's paying special attention to one client at the expense of all others. And it turns out Scott Fisher is doing the same thing. So there's another bottleneck. Okay, we're still at the South Summit. 3 people turn back. They say, look, the time has come, and we ain't making it to the top before the turnaround time. Turnaround time is a time set by the guides to say, if you're not on the summit or heading down by this time, turn around. Otherwise, you'll have to come down the mountain in the dark. Pretty much everybody but these 3 ignored that. The time was supposed to be 1 o'clock. If you ain't at the top by 1 o'clock, turn around. Okay. So we're still at 11:30. We're still doing ropes at the South Summit. By 12:30, we're at what's called the Hillary Step, which is a 40-foot high rock cliff. And so everybody is backed up behind them again. But those 2 guys are the only ones doing the ropes. Beck Weathers is still sitting in the snow. 125, Beidelman, Bukriev. Now, Bukriev is one of the guides. He's gone up without oxygen. Why is that a bad thing? Well, not only that, but he's supposed to be helping clients. Okay? Not only that, he's supposed to keep himself sharp. I mean, one of the things when you run out of oxygen is your brain doesn't work as well as it used to. You don't think very well. One of the reasons people keep trudging up the mountain after turnaround time is because they just can't string all those thoughts together. You talk to them and they say, look, everything I was worried about was that. Okay? 3 breaths a step, 3 breaths a step. They weren't thinking about what time it was, none of that stuff. The guides are supposed to think about that, but they weren't. Okay? So Bukriev and Beidelman make it to the top. Everybody else is still trying to get up the Hillary Step. 2 o'clock, Andy Harris, another one of the guys, makes it to the top, and parts of Fisher's group make it to the top. Everybody else is strung out behind them. Okay, so it's 2 o'clock. Now it's an hour after turnaround. Okay, neither Fisher or Hall have made it to the top yet. Beidelman, Groom, another guy, other parts. Okay, and notice where Bukriev and Andy Harris have gone. Bukriev is without oxygen. He's just tearing on down the mountain. Andy Harris has stopped at the South Summit, where he will announce that none of the oxygens that's been put there for emergency purposes has any oxygen in them. Now that's wrong. People show him the gauges that show the bottles are full of oxygen, and he keeps saying they are empty. What's happened is he has really bad altitude sickness. And so he's lost all ability for rational thought. Nobody notices. And we'll see that he dies in short order. Okay, so Bukriev is tearing ass down the mountain because, well, he wants to get down the mountain. He doesn't talk to anybody. He doesn't help anybody. Beck Weathers is still sitting on the side. 4 o'clock, Rob Hall and Doug Hansen are finally at the top. Everybody else is on their way down. Right about now, a big blizzard hits the mountain. 100-mile-an-hour winds, thunder, lightning, snow, ice, the works. Fairly shortly, especially after the sun goes down, which is in about an hour on this, Nobody can see anywhere further than about 3 feet in front of them. Okay, this is when you need your guides. But what's happened to the guides? Well, Hall's up there with one guy. Okay? Fisher is, as it turns out, Fisher is having lots of trouble. He's actually still on his way up, it turns out. I forgot about that. And everybody else is kind of by themselves. All the clients are just, okay, we'll go down that way. Sandy Pittman has passed out at South Summit. So 4:30, he's still there. Hall and Hansen are still at the top. Beidelman has taken everybody who isn't Hall and Hansen back down toward the Hillary step. Go on. Okay, Beidelman. Andy Harris, we don't know where he is, because about this time, one of the other people sees him down around Camp 4. But after that, nobody sees him ever again. We don't know what happened to him. He likely just fell off the mountain. But while he's doing that, he's calling on his radio to Hansen and Hall, saying there's no oxygen at the South Summit. So Hall doesn't know that's a lie. Okay. So here we have one black box guide telling another black box just wrong information. Not a lie, just wrong. He really believed it. Bukriev, by the way, is already down at Camp 4. He's the first one down. He just zoomed back down. Okay, people are straggling down the mountain. So now it's 6 o'clock, it's full dark. Andy Harris, you don't know where he is. Beck Weathers has gotten up, but is blind. And is being shepherded down the mountain by somebody else. Fisher, we don't know where he is. Makalu Gao, he's a Taiwanese climber, we don't know where he is. But they're somewhere up the mountain. We don't exactly know where they are. Both of them are pretty much out of it with frostbite and altitude sickness, and the Sherpas are dragging them down the mountain. Beidelman, Groom, Pittman, and 8 others are just south of the South Col. That's just a place, but are lost. Okay, so they go into what's called the huddle, which they just sit in the snow and wait for the next day and hope for the best. By midnight, we're still at that position. Okay, Bukriev around 4 a.m. is convinced to go look for people, and he does, and he saves 3 other people in the huddle. Beck Weathers and Yasko Namba are the 2 he doesn't save. He thinks they're dead. Turns out they're not, but he thinks they are. Beck Weathers, around 9 a.m. he's declared dead by Bukriev. 3 p.m. Weathers wakes up and staggers back into Camp 4, and this is the guy who had the, missing this, missing that, melatonin. Okay, he's alive. So he staggers back into Camp 4 and is put into a tent where people think he's going to die. And they already said he was going to die. Earlier that, so they said he's going to die. So they put him in a tent saying, we'll cover him up with a sleeping bag and he'll die because we can't do anything for him. Well, he stays alive. And the next morning, he walks down the mountain with help. Now, who's left dead? Rob Hall is dead, Doug Hansen is dead, Scott Fisher is dead. This fellow, on the north side the same day, there was another expedition to what's called the north side. One side you come from Tibet, the other side you come from Nepal. And the 3 Indo-Tibetan border police guys made it to the top at 5 o'clock. And so way after turnaround time. And this guy is, I'll mispronounce his name so I won't try. He's been there since 1996, he's still there in this cave. He's called Green Boots, and that's called Green Boots Cave. And in 2006, another guy died in that same cave, and he's still there. So my point is that we have all these assumptions about our black boxes, but it turns out they're all wrong. They're all completely destroyed by what is actually going on. 2 weeks later, a South African team climbs past Doug Hansen, Rob Hall, and Scott Fisher's bodies, goes up to the summit, and one of them dies coming back down. So it wasn't the only death that climbing season. What is a thing about our clients that we didn't talk about? There's something that we need to think about these black boxes. There are other factors that we didn't think about. And the one I can think of right off is that not only did they pay for the climb, they've been sitting here at base camp and up and down for a month, getting acclimatized. Okay, so they have an investment not only in money, but time. So they have this want to get up. Turns out to outweigh this want to get down. Okay, most of the people who die on the way down. They make it to the top and they die on the way down because They run out of oxygen. They're exhausted. It gets cold. It gets dark. They die. So our black box analysis of the climbers is wrong because our clients have other factors. Okay, we have Sandy Pittman, who wants to get up the mountain because she's being paid by NBC to get up the mountain, and we have Scott Fisher and Lokseng Jambu, who take it upon themselves to make sure that happens. So it's to the point that Fisher dies. He dies up on the mountain because, for one thing, he was obviously having real trouble with it. I mean, the thing is, if you climb up the mountain, the next time you climb up the mountain, you may get altitude sickness. It isn't one of those things, oh, I'm cool. No, it can happen anytime. So he goes up to the top of the mountain after all his clients have passed him on the way down. Why? There's no reason for that. Okay? Here we have, let's go back and look at the guy, okay? Paid to get the clients up the mountains. Okay? That's not true of Bukriev, right? Bukriev goes up without oxygen and comes back down, just, wee, you're off you go. And Scott Fisher, once all his clients get up to the top, why did he keep going? The reason is because he's a mountain climber and he's there to climb the mountain. Okay, our analysis of the guides is incorrect. Okay, this really nice functionality that we've described turns out not to be the programming that's actually going on. So when we do our analysis of black boxes, we have to know what's happening inside, or else we cannot really describe the functionality. We have to know that. This is just not true. Okay, with the guys' help, the task will be within their power. That's not true. Okay? There were 3 guys who turned around, well, 2 guys and a girl, who turned around early, who were smart enough to know that. Everybody else said, well, I got Scott Fisher with me, no problem. He's experienced. Okay? And they don't really believe that altitude sickness affects them or affects anybody they know. Okay? When you're climbing up the mountain, you got mountain fever, they call it. And you're trying to get up the mountain. And so our black box analysis is just wrong. Any comment or question? Here's another black box that I'm going to talk about. And this black box is not, everybody know what a black box in the plane is? It's actually orange. No, really. I mean, they were originally black boxes, and then people said, well, we can never find them because they're painted bright orange so that people can find them. And there's 2 of them. There's a cockpit voice recorder and a flight control recorder. So you can find out, they push the things down, left, right, or right, or, and what are they saying to each other? Because it turns out that knowing what they do is not sometimes as important as knowing what they think is going on. This is year 2000. So as a little bit of background, there was a mechanic at Alaska Airlines who told the FAA that Alaska Airlines was not doing proper maintenance. And he became an agent for the FAA, reporting to them things were going on. And eventually AAA put him on leave, got him away because he was a spy from their point of view. He eventually sued the Alaska Airlines and resigned. This is all before this happened. Now, this kind of plane has, a lot of times the plane has a stabilizer down here. This is a horizontal stabilizer. It's a stabilizer that's horizontal. Okay, and what it does is it tilts this way and that way. And as it tilts this way or that way, the tail moves either down, which causes the plane to rise, or up, which causes the plane to sink. In other words, if it goes like that, then the plane is going to do that. It's going to go this. And if it goes this way, it's going to go down. Okay, so they're flying along. Very suddenly, the plane goes into a slight dive. And they don't know why. They disengage the autopilot, which doesn't seem to help. And in fact, the dive becomes more pronounced. They manage to pull out of that dive, but they call Alaska Air Maintenance in, I think it's Oregon, for suggestions. What do you think's going wrong? This is what we see. What's going wrong? And Alaska Maintenance says, we can't tell. We don't know. We've never seen this before. Okay. So they keep trying, they're flying near to Los Angeles, and their management at Alaska Airlines keeps trying to convince them to keep going to San Francisco because that way they won't screw up the schedule. The pilots at 16:09, the plane goes. They tried a written procedure to unjam. Apparently, this jam it happens sometimes. There's a procedure to unjam the horizontal stabilizer. It appears to work, but immediately the plane goes into a high-speed dive, 6,000 feet a minute. That's fast. It seems to recover. They seem to have control of the plane. But then, 10 minutes later, they hear really loud thumps and a really loud bang. It's heard on the voice recorder. Okay? And suddenly, the plane goes into a huge dive. And so it goes like this and starts to roll this way. And they know that they can't get the nose to come up upright, so they actually try to fly it upside down. And figuring they can raise the thing that it doesn't work. And it smashes into the water and all aboard. So what happened? This is how that is controlled, flight this way. Okay? So there's a motor that is a lightweight motor that causes this to rotate and causes that to go up and down. But what happens is, when they turn off the autopilot, this engages a more powerful motor. And when they try and recover, the nut at the bottom breaks off. This is the first dive. So I mean, they're very nearly vertical. They managed to pull out of it. The black box, by the way, is this control mechanism. And that breaks off. That's the thump that they hear. The thump that they heard was there's a stop right here. And so that stop it from going any further. The problem is that they're going too fast now because of that long dive. And so there's too much pressure. Boom. That breaks off. Now it's completely uncontrolled. Doesn't matter what the pilots do. This is going to stay like that and put them in a dive. And and after the show's over. Okay, so the black box is this mechanism here. Okay? Because pilots don't know anything about this. All they know is that is the vertical, the horizontal stabilizer goes up and down, and it works. Basically, you push it in, and the plane goes down, pull back, plane go up. That's it. If you're a pilot, that's all you care about. All of this stuff is what the maintenance guys are for. Okay? The problem was that this rod was not lubricated properly. And so what it was actually doing was stripping itself through here. So right before this broke off, it didn't matter what you did here. It was just going to come off. And so when they pulled the plane up from the ocean, and they found steel filings, which were part of the threads that had been worn off. All right, so this is not the pilot. So there we go. This is the other planes who are watching it. Okay, so it's in the second. This is the last dive. Okay. So unbeknownst to the pilots, they have no control over the nose anymore. So what they try and do is eventually they'll roll over and be upside down and say, aha, if we can't get it to go up while we're right side up, let's try upside down. But it turned out it didn't matter. So there we go. So he rolls over. And the pilot says, we'll fly upside down. And that's pretty much the last thing he says. We don't get to hear, by the way, it's against the law for you to hear what's on the cockpit voice recorder. So this is recordings of air traffic from other planes. We can see the text of the thing. We can't hear their voice because it's pretty upsetting. They die. So mistakes that were made. Okay, so here are what I argue is because this is a black box, that it turned out nobody understood what was happening. When it failed, they were all dead, and everybody died. Okay. So the airline had not been properly maintaining that assembly. They had been putting a cheaper grease on every so often. They had stopped inspections. They had been falsifying maintenance records, saying they had done things when they hadn't, because it was cheaper than anything. So what that did was now, okay, so think of this as the operating system. Okay, now we're looking at the operating system of this black box. And so we'll make assumptions. The maintenance guys that they call up in Oregon are going to make assumptions about things because they can look at the maintenance records. Look at the maintenance records for the horizontal stabilizer that says, well, did all the right maintenance, everything's done, no problem. So that can't be the problem. If we were seeing this, the maintenance would have shown us what it wound up showing us. But it wasn't mentioned in any of the maintenance records because they just lied. Because it was faster that way. It was cheaper that way. Okay, so the maintenance guys were not able to help. And the flight crew didn't know that. Okay, so the flight crew keeps trying a bad procedure, because that's what's in the manual, and made it worse. Now, they're probably going to die anyway, but they made it worse by trying to fix it. You can see that in, you've seen that in your computers. If something goes wrong, you try and fix it, you made it worse. It won't boot right, so I'm going to change something now, it won't boot at all. Right? I've done that. Done that often enough. Afterwards, the plane was an MD-83. 15 others from Alaska Airlines were discovered to have the same problem for the same reason. And the people who were on those planes were just lucky. This is one of the reasons I don't like to fly, is because stories like this. Okay, 16 planes could have fallen out of the sky because idiots at corporate were making really bad decisions about what is essentially the operating system of the plane, the mechanical operating system of the plane. Alaska Airlines settled all lawsuits out of court, including the ones with the FAA and all the passengers, so they didn't have to reveal too much about their internal working, because that's another thing you'll find out about black boxes. They have lawyers to back them up, and that's a problem. If you have a black box and the lawyer says you can't look inside it, what do you do? I don't know. That's an interesting question. Black box issue. The two that really matter are the pilots are not aware of that kind of failure mode. In other words, there's a failure mode of a jammed horizontal stabilizer, and there's this, do this and it'll fix, which is basically run it back and forth a couple of times. And that turns out to be worse than anything. The maintenance people who could have helped, maybe, were not aware of what was actually going on, because everything they could see and hear from, in other words, the pilots are reporting, we're in a shallow dive, and all of a sudden we went into a really steep dive, but now we're out of it. So what the maintenance people think is, well, there must be something wrong, but it can't be these things because maintenance has been done on these things. So they can't help the pilot. And Alaska Airlines just lied about maintenance. That screwed up everything. Because all the assumptions that the maintenance people, that the pilots make, everybody, is that the maintenance is done. And what do? If you don't do the maintenance, people die. That's just the rule. Well, then you really hate the next one. Okay, the next one is, this is a black box that actually turns on you. I just thought these, we could have done black boxes that are, things in a car. That's boring. This is stuff that is a black box according to the people using it. That is to say, I don't have to worry about that. It does its thing. I'm done. This gets people killed. Okay, this is just a more interesting, in my opinion, mechanism. You think, well, if I'm making a router, nobody's going to die. Maybe. And you have to think about this stuff. I always love the NTSB accident report was titled Uncontrolled Descent and Collision with Terrain. That is to say, it crashed. 1994, 127 passengers, 5 crew, they all died. They're going to land at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In front of them, about 4 miles away, is a 727. This is a 737, as I remember. Yeah. And the entire event will last 28 seconds. 28 seconds before from going wrong to going really wrong. And the time before pilot action became irrelevant, 10 seconds. We'll have an NTSB animation of that. Okay, so one of the things that's interesting is, to me, is this was a red herring that lasted for a long time. You've heard of wake turbulence, perhaps? That's the turbulence behind a jet. It was kind of like the wake of a ship. It was thought for a while that wake turbulence of a jet was so dangerous that other planes could not fly into that wake. And for this accident, they did a lot of testing and showed that it wasn't true. It turned out, anybody know what a microburst is? Nobody? A microburst is a sort of like a very intense thunderstorm that pushes air straight down. And if your plane flies into that, it just wham into the ground. For many years, it wasn't a recognized phenomenon. And so there were a lot of planes that crashed that were pilot error. But there was a famous crash in Dallas where they had really good flight data. And it turned out that the plane just stopped flying because the air pushed down so hard that the wings didn't work. And so you could hear the pilot saying, push the throttles way up, push them all the way up. It didn't help. It was full throttle on a 737, and it couldn't fly because the air was pushing it down so hard. And so now there are downdraft and microburst detectors on planes because that's usually the way it happens. Somebody dies, and then we know what to fix. That happens with a lot of black boxes, actually. Okay, so the descending. Now, the black box in this case is what's called a tail rudder actuator, which is the thing that makes this part go back and forth. In other words, this goes this way, and the plane turns right. Goes that way, the plane turns left. Okay, so there is a motor that basically pushes against this to push it one way or the other, and it responds from the control, the controls of the plane. Okay, and the other thing that's a black box that will get us is the autopilot. What was discovered is that actuator, if it was very cold, which is to say a cold day, and it hadn't been used for a while, and if very warm hydraulic fluid was suddenly pushed into it to cause the rudder to go back and forth, it will sometimes, very rarely, like 1 in 1,000 or more, jam open. In other words, it'll jam and not move. So the rudder will go and stay that way. When that happens, it goes into a mode where it works in the opposite direction. So that if you turn this way, the plane goes that way. And if you turn this way, you go like that, then the plane keeps going. So what happens is the plane gets a routine turn to heading 100, and then this is real time. All right. So they get told there's a Delta Airlines 727 up in front of you, and they start looking for the wake turbulence of that thing because they just want to make sure it's there. So 1 to 2 o'clock, 6 miles an hour down jet stream rising, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Looking for the traffic, turning to 100 USAir. That's how you always end your talk with it. Okay, so I see it, and then suddenly, okay? Suddenly the pilot is, okay? He doesn't know what's happening. Plane goes that way, and then rolls over hard. Okay? Keeps rolling. Oh shit, yeah, no kidding. All right, and it just right into the ground. Wham! Okay. All right, so what happened? So there were two things that went wrong. One of them is that actuator. The other is they left the autopilot on. They didn't realize it. The autopilot, if you notice when it first started going wrong, it did a little of this. Okay, that's the autopilot trying to recover. And the pilot overcompensated by turning this way to make the plane come back level. And he was actually, because the actuator was in the wrong mode, making it go further to the left. And I mean, you saw how few seconds he had. It was like 10 seconds tops. Okay, to recognize that kind of situation. And just basically, all he had to do was turn off the autopilot so it wouldn't fight him. And turn left, turn into the turn. And it would have come back the other way. The reason we know that is the FAA set up a plane to fail that way and told the pilots what was going to happen. And they did this full scale. I mean, they did this with a real plane with volunteer pilots. And sure enough, if they just turned it into the thing, they'd come up level again. Once they recognized the failure mode, they could live. But these poor guys and the people on the plane didn't have time. They really did. In other words, if I'm turning left, my everything I know says turn right. Bring it back the other way. Come on. And if I do it this way and it keeps turning left, I just keep going harder. It's what you do. In other words, if my car is going to the left, I turn right. And if it keeps going harder to the right, I'm probably just going to keep turning as far as I can. And that's what had happened to these guys. Okay. The other thing was they were both fighting the autopilot. It's possible that they were fighting each other, that the pilot and the co-pilot were both trying to do two different things. We don't know. That we can't know. Wake turbulence was thought to be the case. They did full-scale reconstructions with a 727 and a 737 and tried to make the 737 crash. And they couldn't do it. Wake turbulence just wasn't the issue. All the valves that caused this were replaced as quickly as possible, obviously. And two other crashes that were originally labeled as, of 737s that were labeled as pilot error, were re-evaluated and discovered that there were actually 3 crashes with this problem. It just wasn't recognized. Because according to the pilots, everything was okay, except the plane just took off. They don't, what's this? Another thing is that the autopilot should just turn itself off. You know, if you have cruise control in your car, if you hit the brakes, what happens? Cruise control turns off. That kind of stuff is what should happen in a plane. It typically doesn't, but you got 2 people who are operating the plane at least, or 3. But the real problem was it was a black box that had a failure mode that was not recognized. It was bad design, bad programming, and so that's what we're going to look at. Is the bad guys are looking for bad programming. Okay, they're looking for bad design. They're looking for bad programming.